The blood-red sun cast eerie shadows across the dying world of Velthera. What had once been a magnificent planet of crystal cities now looked like a nightmare. The towering spires that used to shine like diamonds were turning black, infected by something called the Silent Decay. This wasn't just any ordinary disease, it was killing an entire civilization. Elder Kiros stood on the highest balcony of the central spire, his crystalline body flickering between clear light and sickly darkness. As one of the last healthy Kithani, he could feel everything his people felt. Every moment of pain, every surge of fear, every whisper of despair, it all flowed through him like poison in his veins. The Kithani were empaths, blessed and cursed with the ability to sense emotions across great distances. Now, as his race died, that gift had become a living hell. The worst part wasn't the physical decay eating away at their crystal bodies. It was the emotional storm that came with it. When one Kithani felt pain, they all felt it. When one lost hope, that hopelessness spread like wildfire through their empathic network. Kiros watched as his people collapsed not from the disease, but from the crushing weight of their collective suffering. Far across the galaxy, in the grand chamber of the Galactic Council, 12 different alien species gathered to decide the Kithani's fate. The meeting room was vast, with holographic projectors showing representatives from worlds scattered across known space. Some looked like giant insects, others resembled walking trees, and a few appeared to be made of pure energy. Despite their differences, they all shared one thing in common: they were about to condemn an entire race to death. Elder Kiros appeared before them as a shimmering hologram, his form barely stable as the decay worked through his system. His voice, translated through advanced computers, carried the weight of a dying civilization. Honored council members, he began, his words soft but desperate. We do not come asking for wealth or territory. We do not seek to conquer or expand. We ask only for sanctuary, a place where our children might live. We ask for medical help, knowledge that might save what remains of our people. We ask for compassion, the chance to continue existing in this universe. The council members exchanged glances, but their expressions remained cold. The Vorthak representative, a massive creature covered in chitinous armor, spoke first. The Vorthak Dominion faces resource shortages on 17 colony worlds. We cannot spare aid for species outside our territory. The Zilithian ambassador, whose translucent form pulsed with internal light, added her voice to the rejection. Our scientists have determined that the silent decay poses an unacceptable contamination risk. Exposure could threaten our own population. One by one, each species offered excuses. The Morphic Collective claimed biological incompatibility. The Helix Federation cited treaty obligations elsewhere. The Quantum Assembly spoke of temporal paradox risks. Each refusal hit Elder Kiros like a physical blow, and through him, every surviving Kithani felt the sting of abandonment. When the vote came, it was swift and merciless. 12 species, 12 votes for total quarantine. The Kithani system would be sealed off completely. No ships in, no ships out. The galaxy's most powerful civilizations had just decided to watch an entire race die rather than risk helping them. 3 sectors away from this cosmic betrayal, Captain Lee Minho stood on the bridge of the human research vessel Star's Edge. The ship wasn't built for combat or diplomacy, it was designed for exploration and scientific study. Its crew of 4 to 7 humans had been mapping unexplored star systems when their communications array picked up something that made them all stop and listen. It was a distress call unlike anything they'd ever heard. Not just words asking for help, but raw emotion transmitted across space. Even humans, with their limited empathic abilities, could feel the desperation in that signal. "Sir," said Communications Officer Park Jiwon, her voice tight with concern. "I'm receiving new orders from Earth Command. All human vessels are ordered to avoid the Kithani system immediately. The Galactic Council has issued a total quarantine directive." Captain Minho studied the data scrolling across his screens. The silent decay, the dying planet, the emotional broadcasts growing weaker by the hour. Beside him, Chief Medical Officer Dr. Kim Se-young ran preliminary analysis on what little information they had. "Captain," Dr. Kim said quietly, looking up from her medical scanner. "Based on these readings, if nobody helps them, they'll all be dead within weeks. Not just sick, completely extinct. An entire intelligent species wiped out forever." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of ship systems. Engineer Choi Hyun-woo, a quiet man who rarely spoke unless asked, looked up from his console with unusual intensity. "The Star's Edge can make the journey, sir," he said. "Our engines are in good condition, and we have enough supplies for an extended mission. But if we go, we'll be directly violating Earth Command's orders. They'll probably court-martial the whole crew. Captain Minho closed his eyes and thought about his 8-year-old daughter waiting for him back on Earth. What kind of universe was he helping to create for her? One where advanced civilizations could watch genocide happen and do nothing? One where fear and politics mattered more than compassion and basic decency? He opened his eyes and looked at his crew. These were good people, scientists, engineers, medical officers who had joined the space program to explore and discover, not to ignore suffering. He could see in their faces that they were thinking the same thing he was. Set course for Velthora, Captain Minho ordered, his voice steady and determined. Maximum speed. And prepare the medical bay, we're going to need it. The Star's Edge dropped out of hyperspace with a violent shudder that threw everyone on the bridge against their seats. Captain Lee Minho had traveled to dozens of worlds, but nothing had prepared him for what appeared on the main viewing screen. Velthora looked like a dying jewel floating in the darkness of space. The planet's surface was covered with massive cities made entirely of crystal. These weren't built structures like humans might construct, but living formations that had grown over thousands of years. The crystals pulsed with their own inner light, creating patterns that should have been beautiful beyond description. Instead, black veins spread through the crystal like infection through a body. Where the darkness touched, the light died. Dr. Kim Se-young stared at her medical senses in disbelief. The readings were unlike anything in her 15 years as a space doctor. Captain, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, the medical scans are showing something impossible. The Kithani aren't just dying from some kind of disease. They're dying from emotions. What do you mean? Minho asked, moving to look over her shoulder at the data. Their empathic network is overloading, Dr. Kim explained, pointing to the strange energy patterns on her screen. Every Kithani on that planet is feeling the fear and pain of every other Kithani at the same time. Imagine feeling the death of your entire species happening inside your own mind. Before anyone could respond, the ship's science officer, Dr. Yoon Jizu, called out from her station with growing excitement in her voice. Captain, you need to see this. I've been analyzing the decay patterns on the planet's surface, and something doesn't add up. Dr. Yoon was young for a xenobiologist, but she was brilliant at understanding how alien life forms worked. She had spent the journey studying every piece of data they had about the silent decay. Now her face was pale with a mixture of excitement and horror. This isn't a natural disease, she announced to the bridge crew. Look at these spore distribution patterns. They're too perfect, too targeted. Someone created this plague specifically to kill the Kithani. Captain Minho felt a chill run down his spine. Are you saying someone made a weapon designed to wipe out an entire species? That's exactly what I'm saying, Dr. Yoon replied. The spores attack the Kithani's neural pathways in very specific ways. They target the parts of their brains that control their empathic abilities. Whoever made this knew exactly how Kithani biology works. The bridge fell silent as everyone absorbed this information. They weren't just witnessing a tragedy, they were looking at the results of deliberate genocide. Diplomat Han Seo-jun stepped forward from his communication station. Han was known throughout the human space fleet for his ability to make contact with alien species. He had learned dozens of alien languages and understood the subtle ways different cultures communicated. Captain, Han said, I'm receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. Someone is trying to contact us. Put it through, Minho ordered. The main screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at something that took their breath away. The being that appeared before them looked like a living sculpture made of the finest crystal. Light flowed through his transparent body in patterns that seemed to match his thoughts. But the beautiful crystalline form was marred by black streaks that pulsed like infected wounds. I am Keeper Oldhose of the Kithani, the being said, his voice somehow managing to carry music even through the mechanical translation system. You actually came. But why? Your ship's signatures identify you as humans. Your species has no treaties with us, no obligations to help us. Han leaned forward to respond. We came because you needed help. That's reason enough. Althos's crystalline form flickered with what might have been surprise. But the empathic storm around our world will affect your minds. Our pain will become your pain. Our despair will flow into your thoughts. Many species find our empathic abilities uncomfortable even in normal times. Now, as we die, that discomfort becomes agony. Han looked back at Captain Minho, who nodded encouragingly. Then we'll face that agony together, Han replied simply. You shouldn't have to suffer alone. For a long moment, Oldhose said nothing. His crystal form shimmered as waves of emotion passed through him. When he finally spoke again, his voice carried a note of wonder. In all our centuries of contact with other species, no one has ever said such words to us. Most races fear our empathic abilities. They believe we invade their private thoughts, that we judge them for their hidden feelings. They see our gift as a curse. Over the next several hours, Han carefully established a communication link that allowed for deeper conversation. What the humans learned changed everything they thought they knew about galactic politics. For more than 1,000 years, the Kithani had served as secret peacekeepers throughout the galaxy. Their empathic abilities allowed them to sense the true feelings behind diplomatic words. When two species negotiated a treaty, the Kithani could feel whether both sides genuinely wanted peace or if one was planning betrayal. When conflicts arose, they could identify the real sources of anger and fear that led to war. "We have prevented hundreds of wars," Altos explained as his form grew dimmer with exhaustion. "Genocides that never happened because we helped enemies understand each other. Peace treaties that lasted centuries because we helped negotiators find common ground. We worked in secret, never taking credit, never asking for payment. And now someone wants to eliminate you," Captain Minho said. "Without us, the galaxy will descend into chaos within a single generation," Altos replied sadly. "Species that have maintained peace for decades will remember old grudges. Diplomatic systems that depend on trust will collapse when there's no one left who can sense true intentions." Dr. Yoon's analysis had revealed something even more disturbing. The biological weapon that was killing the Kithani had been designed by someone with intimate knowledge of their biology and culture. The creator knew not just how their bodies worked, but how their empathic network functioned, how their society was organized, and most importantly, how crucial they were to galactic stability. Someone wanted the peacekeepers eliminated, Dr. Yoon reported to the senior staff later that day. "The question is, who benefits from galactic war?" Dr. Kim Soo-young stood in the medical bay of the Star's Edge, staring at data that would have seemed impossible just days ago. While other species throughout the galaxy had always seen the Kithani's empathic abilities as something uncomfortable or even dangerous, she was beginning to understand that these same abilities might be the key to saving them. "Captain," she called over the ship's communication system, "I need you and the senior staff in Medical Bay 1 immediately. I think I know how to help them." When the crew gathered around her workstation, Dr. Kim pulled up a three-dimensional model of the Kithani empathic network. It looked like a web of glowing threads connecting every member of their species across the planet below. "Every other medical team that has ever studied the Kithani has tried to block their empathic connections," she explained, pointing to the flowing energy patterns. "They see the emotional overflow as the problem. But what if it's actually the solution?" Engineer Choi Hyun-woo frowned as he studied the display. "I don't understand. How can feeling everyone's pain at once be helpful?" "Because they are not just feeling pain," Dr. Kim replied, her voice growing excited. "They're sharing it. The problem isn't that they are connected, it's that their network is overloaded. Too much emotional data flowing through too few healthy individuals." She turned to face the assembled crew. "I'm proposing something that's never been tried in galactic medicine. Instead of trying to block the empathic overflow, we create a support network. We become empathic anchors, humans who voluntarily connect to their system and help carry the emotional load." The room fell silent as everyone processed what she was suggesting. Communications Officer Park Ji-won was the first to speak. "You asking us to share their feelings? To actually experience what they're going through?" "More than that," Dr. Kim admitted. "You would be sharing their memories, their fears, their hopes. Some of their experiences would become part of your own mental landscape. There's no way to predict what that might do to a human mind over time." Before she could say another word, nearly every person in the room stepped forward. Engineer Choi raised his hand first, followed immediately by Park Ji-won. Security Chief Lim Tae-hyun, a tough man who rarely showed emotion, nodded grimly. Navigator Sung Min-ji, barely 23 years old, looked determined despite her obvious fear. "Count me in," said Petty Officer Kang Yoon-ji from the back of the room. "If it helps save them, I'll do it." Captain Minho looked around at his crew with a mixture of pride and concern. "Dr. Kim, what are the risks? I need to know what I'm asking my people to do." "Honestly, Captain, I don't know," Dr. Kim replied. "Humans have limited empathic abilities compared to the Kithani. We might be able to handle the emotional overflow better than their own people can right now. Or the experience might cause permanent psychological damage. We could end up with severe depression, anxiety disorders, or even complete mental breakdown. Then we'll find out together," Captain Minho said, echoing the sentiment that had brought them to this dying world in the first place. The first connection attempts were more difficult than anyone had imagined. Dr. Kim started with volunteer testing, using modified medical equipment to create temporary links between human crew members and individual Kithani on the planet's surface. Petty Officer Kang Yoonji was the first to try. She lay on a medical bed with neural interface cables attached to her temples, her vital signs displayed on monitors around the room. The moment the connection activated, her body went rigid and she began to scream. Through the empathic link, Yoonji was experiencing the death of the Kithani as if it were happening to her own family. She felt the confusion of Kithani children who didn't understand why their parents were turning to stone. She experienced the grief of parents watching their offspring fade away. The weight of an entire civilization's despair crashed into her human mind like a tsunami. Dr. Jung Hyun, the ship's psychologist, volunteered next. He managed to maintain the connection for nearly 10 minutes before the experience of a dying Kithani child's final moments overwhelmed his consciousness. The medical team had to sedate him when he began speaking in the Kithani language, repeating the child's last words over and over. But something remarkable began to happen as more humans joined the network. Where the Kithani could only feel their collective despair growing stronger, the humans began to process and transform those emotions. Their minds worked differently, approaching the overwhelming grief with determination rather than resignation. Diplomat Han Seo-jun proved to have an unusual natural resistance to empathic overflow. Unlike the others, he could maintain clear thinking even while connected to multiple Kithani at once. Through him, the deeper truth about their situation began to emerge. The weapon didn't come from some unknown enemy, Han reported after a particularly intense connection session. Keeper Old Hose showed me images from their collective memory. The biological spores were created by something called the Hegemonic Order. Captain Minho had never heard of this organization, but Keeper Old Hose explained it through their growing empathic link. The Hegemonic Order was a radical faction that believed the galaxy should be organized into strict hierarchies. Superior species would rule over inferior ones, with no room for equality or mutual understanding. The Kithani threatened everything they stood for. Alphonse's voice came through Han's translation, his crystalline form beginning to stabilize as the human-supported empathic network grew stronger. We represented the possibility of true communication between species. A galaxy where conflicts could be resolved through understanding rather than conquest. That was their greatest nightmare. As more humans joined the empathic network, something unprecedented began to happen. The combined human technology and Kithani empathic abilities started to reverse the silent decay itself. Dr. Kim developed targeted treatments based on what the humans were learning through their emotional connections, while the Kithani used their restored empathic powers to heal not just their physical bodies, but their collective spirit. The black veins running through the crystal cities began to fade. Kithani who had been on the edge of death started to recover. Most importantly, the crushing despair that had been destroying their civilization began to lift as hope returned to their empathic network. We're not just curing a plague, Captain Minho realized as he watched the planet's crystal cities beginning to shine with their natural light again. We're preventing the collapse of galactic civilization itself. The warning alarm screamed through the star's edge as 30 massive warships dropped out of hyperspace around the Velthra system. Captain Lee Minho rushed to the bridge, where Tactical Officer Baek Jonjin was already running combat analysis on the approaching fleet. Captain, Baek said, his voice tight with worry, these aren't exploration ships or merchant vessels. These are full military battleships, heavily armed and moving in attack formation. Minho stared at the tactical display showing the overwhelming force bearing down on them. Each enemy ship was at least 3 times larger than the star's edge, and their research vessel carried no weapons beyond basic defensive systems. In a straight fight, they would be destroyed in minutes. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the lead battleship, Communications Officer Park Ji-won reported. Put it through, Minho ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing a figure in dark military armor. The being's face was hidden behind a helmet, but his voice carried the cold authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. Human vessel, you are in violation of Galactic Council quarantine orders. You have exactly 10 minutes to withdraw from this system. Any continued interference with hegemonic order operations will be considered an act of war against superior species. The transmission cut off before Minho could respond. Around the bridge, his crew looked at him with a mixture of fear and determination. They all knew what those ships were here to do, finish the genocide that the biological weapon had started. Sir, Tactical Officer Baek said quietly, our shields might hold against 1 or 2 of those ships for a few minutes. Against 30 battleships, we don't stand a chance. Navigator Song Minji looked up from her station with tears in her eyes. Captain, there are still millions of Kithani down on that planet. They're just starting to recover. If we leave now. We're not leaving, Captain Minho said firmly. We came here to help, and that's what we're going to do. But even as he spoke those brave words, Minho knew conventional tactics were useless. The Star's Edge couldn't outfight 30 warships, and they couldn't outrun them either. They needed a different kind of solution. That solution came from an unexpected source. Diplomat Han Seo-jun, still connected to the Kithani empathic network through the neural interfaces Dr. Kim had developed, suddenly looked up with excitement in his eyes. Captain, Han said, Keeper Old Hose is trying to tell me something important. The Kithani's empathic abilities aren't limited to feeling emotions between individuals. They can broadcast across interstellar distances. What do you mean? Minho asked. They can transmit their experiences to every empathically sensitive species in the galaxy simultaneously, Han explained, his voice growing more excited as he understood the implications. Every species that's ever interacted with them, every world where they've served as mediators, they could all experience what's really happening here. Dr. Kim rushed to her medical station, pulling up data on the empathic network they had helped stabilize. It's theoretically possible, she said. With the human volunteers serving as empathic anchors, the Kithani network is stronger than it's been in months. If we could amplify their signal using the ship's communication array. Do it, Captain Minho ordered without hesitation. Working frantically as the enemy fleet closed in, the human crew helped Keeper Old Hose and the surviving Kithani elders prepare for something that had never been attempted before. They were going to broadcast the truth about what had happened to them across the entire galaxy. The transmission began just as the first hegemonic order ships entered weapons range. But instead of targeting the Star's Edge, something extraordinary happened. Across thousands of worlds, billions of intelligent beings suddenly experienced the Kithani story as if they had lived it themselves. On the Vorthak homeworld, the chitinous creatures who had claimed resource shortages felt the Kithani's 1,000 years of quiet service. They experienced memories of Vorthak's Ilithian conflicts that never escalated into war because Kithani mediators helped both sides find peaceful solutions. On Zilithian colonies throughout the galaxy, the translucent beings who had feared biological contamination felt the pain of abandonment when the Galactic Council turned its back on an entire species. They experienced the hope that flowed through the Kithani network when the humans arrived. The Morphic Collective, spread across 17 different star systems, suddenly understood that the Kithani hadn't been invasive empaths trying to read private thoughts. They had been guardians, using their abilities to prevent wars and save lives. Even aboard the attacking warships, the empathic transmission was having an unexpected effect. Hegemonic order soldiers, trained from birth to see other species as inferior, were suddenly experiencing something they had never imagined possible, the true depth of compassion and wisdom they were about to destroy. Commander Vextar of the Battleship Supremacy stood on his bridge watching his crew's reactions to the empathic broadcast. His weapons officer, a hardened veteran of dozens of campaigns, was staring at his console with tears streaming down his face. His tactical specialist had removed her helmet and was speaking in a whisper about preventing wars rather than starting them. Commander, his communications officer called out, I'm receiving reports from the other ships in the fleet. Crew members throughout the battle group are refusing to fire on the Kithani world. Vextar felt the empathic transmission washing over him as well. For the first time in his military career, he was experiencing what it felt like to choose peace over conquest, understanding over domination. The Kithani weren't weak creatures deserving destruction. They were the invisible force that had kept the galaxy from tearing itself apart for centuries. Fleet Command, Vextar transmitted on the open channel, this is Commander Vextar of the Supremacy. My crew is standing down. We didn't know. We didn't understand what the Kithani really were. Across the hegemonic fleet, similar transmissions began flooding the communication networks. Ship after ship powered down their weapons as crews experienced the truth about the species they had come to destroy. Some captains opened channels to beg forgiveness from the Kithani. Others simply ordered their ships to jump back into hyperspace, unable to face what they had nearly done. Within an hour, the 30-ship battle fleet that had come to complete a genocide was reduced to 3 vessels whose commanders still refused to accept what they had experienced. Those 3 ships fled the system rather than face the consequences of their actions. The galaxy-wide empathic transmission had done more than save the Kithani from immediate destruction. It had revealed the truth about galactic politics to every intelligent species in known space. The galaxy-wide empathic transmission that had saved the Kithani from destruction created shock waves that reached far beyond the Velthra system. Within days of experiencing the truth about the Kithani's secret role as peacekeepers, populations across hundreds of worlds began demanding answers from their governments. On the Zilithian homeworld, massive protests filled the crystal plazas of their capital cities. The translucent beings who had always prided themselves on logic and careful decision-making were horrified to learn that their leaders had condemned an entire species to death out of fear. Zilithian citizens surrounded government buildings, their bodies pulsing with angry light as they chanted demands for their leaders to resign. The situation was even worse on Vorthak colony worlds throughout the Outer Rim. When the chitinous beings learned that their government had lied about resource shortages while allowing genocide to proceed, 17 different colonies declared independence from the Central Vorthak Authority. Civil war seemed inevitable as different factions blamed each other for the moral catastrophe. The Morphic Collective, which had always functioned as a unified group mind, experienced something unprecedented: internal fracture. Individual components began rejecting the collective's decision to abandon the Kithani, creating chaos in their shared consciousness. For the first time in their species' history, parts of the collective stopped communicating with other parts. Within 6 months, the Galactic Council that had ruled interstellar politics for over 2,000 years collapsed completely. Species after species withdrew their membership, declaring that they could no longer trust an organization capable of such callous abandonment of those in need. From this chaos, something new began to emerge. Captain Lee Minho and Keeper Althoz, working through their strengthened empathic connection, started discussing an alternative to the failed council system. Instead of an organization focused on political control and resource management, they envisioned something dedicated to protecting the vulnerable and preventing future genocides. The first gathering of what would become the Guardian Alliance took place in the restored crystal cities of New Velthera. The Kithani world had recovered dramatically since the humans helped reverse the silent decay. The crystal spires once again glowed with their natural light, and the empathic network that had nearly been destroyed was stronger than ever. Representatives from dozens of species gathered in the great crystal amphitheater that the Kithani had grown specifically for the occasion. Captain Minho stood before the assembled delegates, his voice carrying clearly through the universal translation systems. "We're here because we all learned the same terrible lesson," he began. "We learned that advanced civilizations, species with incredible technology and ancient wisdom, could watch genocide happen and do nothing to stop it. We learned that fear and politics could be more important than basic compassion." He paused, looking out at the diverse crowd of beings who had come to hear his proposal. "But we also learned something else. We learned that there are still those willing to risk everything to help others. We learned that ordinary people from many different species share the same basic desire to protect the innocent." Keeper Althoz joined Minho at the speaking platform, his crystalline form now completely free of the black corruption that had nearly killed his people. When he spoke, his words were translated not just into different languages, but into the emotional harmonics that different species use to communicate deeper meanings. The Galactic Council failed because it was built on the idea that some species were more important than others, Althoz explained. The Guardian Alliance will be different. We will judge our success not by how much territory we control or how many resources we command, but by how well we protect those who cannot protect themselves. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Species after species stepped forward to join the new alliance. The humans provided medical expertise and technological innovation. The reformed Zilithian government offered advanced agricultural techniques to help restore damaged worlds. Even former hegemonic order worlds, racked with guilt over their participation in near-genocide, contributed resources and knowledge to the rebuilding efforts. Some of the most surprising support came from individual members of species whose governments had opposed the alliance. Vorthak engineers who had been horrified by their leaders' actions volunteered to help design new types of rescue vessels. Morphic collective components that had broken away from their group mind offered their unique abilities to detect distress signals across vast distances. As the alliance grew, Keeper Althoz shared something with Captain Minho that changed how the human understood their first meeting. "We sensed your people long before you arrived at Velthera," the Kithani revealed during one of their regular empathic communication sessions. "Of all the galaxy's species, only humans possess the emotional complexity necessary to truly connect with our empathic network." "What do you mean?" Minho asked. "Other species saw our empathic abilities as an invasion of privacy or a sign of weakness," Althoz explained. "They were uncomfortable with beings who could sense their true feelings. But humans were different. Where others saw our empathy as something threatening, you saw it as a bridge between species." The Guardian Alliance's first major project was the construction of a new class of starships designed specifically for rescue and aid missions. These Guardian vessels would be crewed by mixed teams of humans and Kithani, combining human technological innovation with Kithani empathic abilities to locate and help species in crisis. Captain Minho was offered command of the Alliance flagship, a massive vessel capable of carrying entire refugee populations to safety. To everyone's surprise, he declined the promotion. Instead, he chose to remain aboard the Star's Edge, which had been refitted and upgraded to serve as one of the first Guardian vessels. The big ships are important, Minho explained to the Alliance leadership, but someone needs to be out there finding the species that need help before it's too late. That's what the Star's Edge does best. His crew, forever changed by their connection to the Kithani empathic network, unanimously agreed to continue their mission. They had experienced something that few beings in the galaxy ever would, the direct emotional connection between different intelligent species. That experience had shown them that despite vast differences in biology, culture, and technology, all sentient beings shared the same basic needs for safety, understanding, and hope. The story's final scene took place 5 years later in the Crystal Gardens of New Velthera. Human children and young Kithani played together among the living crystal formations, their laughter creating harmonious echoes that resonated through the empathic network. Their parents worked nearby as empathic diplomats and mediators, helping to resolve conflicts between species throughout the galaxy. The universe remained vast and often cruel, filled with dangers that could destroy entire civilizations. But now there was something new in that darkness, the knowledge that some species would never abandon others in their time of need. As long as beings like humanity existed, beings willing to risk everything for compassion rather than conquest, hope would continue to shine like the crystal cities of Velthera, beautiful and unbreakable in the endless night of space.